Let's look at the third phrase. The third phrase, this is in verse 16, says, my judgment is true. So he's contrasting his judgment versus the Pharisees' judgment. You guys are all judging according to the flesh, according to the world, secular judgment. My judgment is true because my judgment is divine. It's godly judgment. And godly judgment is always correct. It's always right. It's always pure. It's always perfect. Which is why we shouldn't judge, but rely on his judgment, as it were. Think about that. Think about no condemnation. Think about God stepping in and showing true, perfect, absolute correct judgment. Job, we read from Job this morning during the worship service. And Job's friends mostly say stupid stuff to him. But eventually they get to Job, and Job demonstrates a little pride, the sin of pride. And God rolls into Job's scene with his friends as a storm and speaks to him from the clouds and asks Job a series of questions. They're good questions, but they're rhetorical questions because the answer to every one is, no, I have no idea. Where were you when I created the universe? No idea. Where were you when I set the boundary between the sea and the land? No idea. And so he questions Job to a place of humility and acceptance, where Job then will make sacrifices for his friends. God's judgment on Job is true. The Israelites, I really appreciate the Old Testament, and I appreciate the Israelites. I am the most pro-Jew, pro-Israel person that I know, even now. But the Old Testament, what I love about the Old Testament is what a great and wonderful bad example the Israelites are. I mean, I learn very, very well from bad examples. If you do something really, really dangerous, dumb, and stupid, and I watch it, I'll learn not to repeat that same action. That's how I learn. I appreciate that. Thank you for the mess ups of people around me for me to learn from that. Okay, don't want to do that. The Israelites rejected and rebelled against God over and over and over and over and over and over again. And he kept giving them 300th chances, 350th chances, generations. And finally, in the midst of godly right judgment, he takes the promised land away from them and sends them into exile. Sends them to Babylon for a generation. And then after a generation, a remnant will be able to come back. God's faithful judgment. It was good, it was true, it was right, it was incredibly patient. And I appreciate that example as well, Lord, for you being patient with me. And then we talked about how Jesus is the divine end of times judge. And this is, of course, Revelation chapter 20, where God's judgment is good and true and perfect. The great white throne judgment of Revelation chapter 20, verses 11 through 15. This is where God evaluates the living and the dead. Jesus evaluates the living and the dead. Salvation. Are you going to heaven? Are you going to hell? It's a powerful idea. Let's look at Revelation chapter 20, verses 11 through 15, just for a moment. Then I saw a great white throne and him who sat upon it, from whose presence earth and heaven fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, the great and the small, standing before the throne, and books were open. And another book was open, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged from the things which were written in the books according to their deeds. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it. And death and Hades gave up the dead which were in them. And they were judged, every one of them, according to their deeds. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. If you have put your faith, your belief, your trust in Jesus Christ, your name is written in the book of life. You are a sheep. You are the wheat. And for those who have rejected Jesus as Savior and Lord, then they are the goats. They are the weeds. And they are cast into the lake of fire, which is a phrase for hell, eternal punishment. We've all earned eternal punishment. Some of us are just smart enough to accept the get out of jail free card in Jesus Christ. Perfect God, perfect judgment, always, every time. Look at Look at Deuteronomy 32. Deuteronomy 32 verse 4 says that our God is perfect and everything he does is perfect, including judgment. So you and I, as his adopted children, because God is perfect and everything he does is perfect, you and I can put a great deal of trust, even blind trust, into what God is doing, because we know it's perfect. Especially when we don't understand it, especially when we can't see the fallout, especially when God's work, God's action, God's will, God's plan, God's timing is perfect, 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 perfect. And we need to remember, we aren't God, and follow him. Deuteronomy 32, verse 4, says this: the rock, his work is perfect, for all his ways are just, a God of faithfulness and without injustice. Righteous and upright is he. He's perfect, he's just, he has integrity, he's righteous, he's upright. If this doesn't shake out the desire and temptation to rebel against him, I don't know what will. If this isn't the fast forward button for obeying God's commands, I mean, the fact that he is perfect and trustworthy, we need to apply this to our lives by obeying what God says, because it's good, it's perfect, it has our best interests in it. We need to, before we make a plan, before we make a goal, before we step out, we need to be praying and seeking God's will before we get ourselves into trouble. He's got a good and perfect plan for us. He has given us a good and perfect gift and has called us to be his mouthpieces. So he has given us this gift of salvation that plucks us from the lake of fire, and we have this gift not to just keep to ourselves, but to share to others. And so he is good, he is perfect, he has a plan. And his plan is to have us share with the goats and the weeds an opportunity for a transformation, a change of allegiance, to leave the kingdom of darkness and be transferred into the kingdom of light. And so we ought to be able to share Jesus quickly and easily, because it's all absolutely perfect. And I know in any given worship service, we all nod and say yes, but it's when we're talking to the checkout person and there's no line at all, and they're a Gabby Gus, and you really just want to leave, instead of seeing a divine opportunity to show love for God and love to that person by sharing the gift you have received with them. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. What about, that's feet and hands of loving God for sure.